what's going on, Los Angeles, Bruin Nation, LAFB fam? How we doing? Your dynamic duo back together again for all of your UCLA football needs. And we have a wonderful episode ahead. We are officially in the transfer portal window, but a very historic episode for us indeed. Our first episode of 2026. Want to wish everybody a beautiful new year and so excited for being on this journey with you over the next 365 days and beyond. This is going to be a special year for UCLA sports. Thriller and I can feel it. And before we jump into all of the portal madness, we've had some ins, we've had some outs. It's a lot of turnover already on day one that we're so excited about that we expected. First and foremost, Thriller, Happy New Year, my brother. So grateful to be doing this with you another year. How was the new year and any resolutions for 2026?
Man, great questions to start. Yes, happy 2026 to everyone watching, to my main man, the madman to my left. Everything is great, man. Just spent some time with the family, had a great time. Really excited to talk some portal with you as we got some names coming in here that I think are going to be really hot commodities, not just for UCLA, but for the rest of the country. And my resolution for this year is just to see more UCLA football W's across the board for our Bruins this season, man. So let's get more W's on and off the field. And, man, let's make 2026 as good as we possibly can.
No doubt, indeed, brother. You know, prophetic from Will the Thrill Decker, indeed. Thriller, really fun episode. You know, I think we've got a list of guys that, you know, targeting in terms of some wish list gets in terms of needs and who's out there, who's entered the portal. We've also, I think, got some very interesting updates along the lines of former coaches and where they've ended up. And so excited for them and their journey. We'll touch on that in a bit. But let's start, Thriller, with some departures. You know, we've sort of talked in detail about the Chesney coaching staff forming here. And, you know, he sort of completed the majority of his coaching staff. Chesney talked about, you know, just in the days and weeks to come, a couple of spots still remain, but really 95% of the staff is in place. So now the new focus, the new energy, the new strategy is in place. So we expected guys to exit the portal as well, because anytime you have a coaching turnover, it's a fresh start on both ends, right? The team that you're sort of inheriting, as well as players that were there. Couple of big ones, though, today, Thriller. You know, 4 notable ones in particular. First is, got to start with our man, Quasi Gilmer, you know, leading receiver for the Bruins in 2025, led the team in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns, 50 catches, 535 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think we see a very bright future for Quasi Gilmer wherever he goes. I think you and I both expected this to a certain extent, just given, I think, what he showed. And I think there's flashes. I don't think we've seen the whole package yet from Gilmer, but when you look at how light of a market the wide receiver market is right now in the transfer portal, you know, Gilmer testing that market. And when you look at some teams that even made it to the college football playoff or teams that were on the fringe of the college football playoff, you saw, hey, if this team was just had one more playmaker on the outside, maybe there were 1 or 2 playmakers on the outside away from really taking that next step. So I think Gilmer testing the market is going to be significant. I don't rule out the possibility, Thriller, of Gilmer potentially even coming back, depending on the NIL situation, given, you know, as he builds the relationship, you know, with Dean Kennedy and Chesney. But Gilmer is number 1 in the portal. I'll just sort of go through the 4 and then get your thoughts. Number 2, our favorite Bruin, perhaps of all, our crowd favorite, the Bugatti, Mateen Magani in the portal. That was a crusher for me, Thriller. You know, but again, I think just given the type of year that he had, came from Cal, came to UCLA, you're seeing another theme here, Thriller, during, you know, conference championship season, bowl season, as well as, you know, these CFP games, the power of the special teams. And, you know, so many times the special teams can swing one of these games, can swing the momentum. And so, again, Bagani, I think there's going to be a really rich market out there for him, for a team that, you know, needs to elevate their secondary and feels like they've got really good talent on both sides of the ball. So really sad to see Bagani go. What a crowd favorite he was and did some phenomenal things for UCLA over these past 2 years. Number 3 thriller was interesting. Isaiah Chisholm, second leading tackler on the team, with 80 plus tackles. And, you sort of look at that situation. Obviously, he and John were really sort of the vast majority of tackles there playing those backer spots. I think Chisholm put some nice things together on tape. But I think this one felt a little bit more to me, Thriller, that, hey, maybe the scheme of what Hitchler wants to do may not be perfectly aligned with Chisholm's skill set. And I think Chisholm, is also kind of looking for perhaps a new start. He came in with that Malloy scheme. That's what he was really sold on. Now the scheme has changed. He's got to potentially reset the board. And then the last one, Thriller, which was sort of an interesting one. I think a diamond in the rough for us. He showed some tremendous flashes from a pass rush perspective. Anthony Jones on the edge, second half, particularly early in the season and then late in the season, did some really nice things with Jones. My gosh, this is going to be his 4th team in 4 years when you think about the transfer portal. So, Thriller, before we get into sort of our wish list of players and the marketplace, and so excited that we are, just your thoughts on Gilmer, Bagani, Chisholm, and Jones' departures into the portal.
Yeah, it's a bummer to see these guys go because we've watched these guys at spring practices. We've watched them in games. And, what we've seen from these guys is like a high potential scenario for, your Quasi Gilmers and players like this. As a true freshman last year, Quasi was kind of the darling of UCLA football. And, you wish the utmost success for him moving forward. I think he's clearly talented enough. He's got a visit scheduled to Georgia, Arizona State, among others right now. So it'll be very interesting to see where his feet land for next season. But, if you're making the trade, if you're going to make a coaching change to the seismic condition of a Bob Chesney coming to UCLA, you're going to have to let some old things go. And,
Exactly.
With that, you got to bring in some new stuff. So we wish Quasi and all those guys well. They're always going to be UCLA Bruins in our hearts. But if you're telling me I could have a coach that just made the college football playoff, bring in his ideologies, his type of players, and we follow that model compared to where we were at previously a year ago, I take that deal every day of the week. Bagani hurts, man. I got to be honest. I'll never forget the Iowa game we were at where he drills. I think it's 10-0 at this point. Iowa's kind of seizing momentum. Yeah. This is last year, night game at the Rose Bowl. He kicks like a 55-yarder. We had just walked in. Traffic was horrible on a Friday night. I was with you and your pops, and we see the 55-yarder, and that was kind of the sparking point for UCLA getting back in that game, especially with the previous year. I don't know if you remember the special team struggles with Chip's final year. I mean, it was arguably the worst kicking situation in college football that year. So just to have a stable kicker for the last 2 seasons with Bagani was such a gift to UCLA fans and watching the special teams. Different guys like that. Anthony Jones, I thought, had a ton of potential, but he didn't necessarily reach that in a UCLA uniform. And Chisholm is the guy that I really kind of want to see back in a UCLA uniform. I think him as a linebacker, you saw the production there. And hey, don't rule him out, following Malloy to Penn State, who just got named, their D-line coach there. He's got some contacts now at Penn State and State College up there. But, also Keanu Williams departing from the program, also Rico Flores, these type of household names. But if you could tell me, you got to get Bob Chesney, you got to keep your quarterback one. I think Eugene Brooks was a very, very underrated re-sign given the ceiling that kid possesses. And we just got announced today that Roderick Pleasant is coming back, one of the star corners from the team.
No doubt.
I think I take that trade 100 times out of 100. So, the future's bright despite some, star Bruins of the past departing from the program.
No, Thriller. I mean, really well said. I mean, I think, those are the 4 departs. We had mentioned, Keanu a couple days ago as well. I think you said it best. It's a new coaching staff. It's a new philosophy. You got to be able to start fresh, both from a coaching staff perspective, but also these players that maybe have been in the program the last 2-3 years have had now different iterations, right? Some of these players have been with Chip. Some of these players have been with DeShaun. They also need, a bit of a fresh start in terms of a situation where they feel like they can kind of enter and provide an immediate impact. So, we wish all of these guys nothing but the best. They're always going to be Bruins, and keep an eye, particularly, I think, on potentially Gilmer, Chisholm, the possibility of a return even depending on how things play out. But this is now about turning the page, and we are expecting the tsunami, the influx of about 30 or 40 players here, Thriller. Primarily, a couple of sources like we talked about, JMU being one, and then kind of the SoCal kids that went to other programs now that are in the portal being the other. And then you're sort of peppering it with, relationships that this existing coaching staff has had moving forward. So, as like we talked about on the last show, the formation of this front office is now starting to look like a modern front office in today's college football. I think we're just on the edge of our seat here, Thriller, in terms of breaking news left and right of who that influx is going to be. And to your last point, I mean, I think the return of Pleasant is huge. Both Pleasant and Brooks, I mean, absolutely massive in that regard. Thriller, let's shift gears here. Now, as we talk about this influx, this tsunami that's coming, I know we've got our eye on some players, in the portal, perhaps some reaches, but perhaps some guys that are dead on targets from a money standpoint, position group standpoint. It's been an interesting combination of players that have entered the portal for a variety of reasons. Who are maybe a group of 8 to 10 players that you really have your eye on here? And we can kind of do 2-3 at a time and chat about that. But what are the Thriller insights here of this 2026 transfer portal?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I kind of did some deep diving into the portal, players that made sense for UCLA coming through here. And I came up with a list of about 10 guys. And I'm not even including Brown, the wide receiver from Yale, which is rumored to be a guy that's going to be visiting here. But I came up with a good list. I found some top players from JMU, which are probably pretty obvious to you guys. Some guys that you may not have heard of that, are rumored to have some semblance of interest with UCLA, and then a wish list where it just kind of makes sense for some of these guys to kind of come through. And, the things that I was looking at with here, and I think what every coach and every team is looking at with the transfer portal, they're either looking for an immediate impact player, because remember, this is not high school football. These are guys you're expected to kind of jump in and you grab them right away and they can contribute, plug and play out there on the football field. So you got the guys that can immediately contribute, and then you got the guys you want to develop maybe for a year or two, put some seasoning on, and then if they reach that ceiling, they can be all Big Ten contributors at the end of the day. And we'll start with the obvious ones, the JMU guys. I think everyone knows all about these dudes. And the number one player in the wish list, it's no secret, man. It's Mr. Sahir West, freshman All-American, 7 sacks last year, 6'4", 270-pound beast defensive end coming from Baltimore originally. And I think this is even just a higher chance we can land him now that we have Coach Hitchler on staff. And then Sam Daniels, the new defensive end coach, is now also with UCLA as well. So you got his former coaching staff. It went pretty well in year one with Sahir West there. We'd love to have him back. It was very interesting. I think On3 has him a little lower than I would have had him. I think he's the 102nd ranked player in the On3 transfer portal class as it stands right now. But I think if you ask any Bruins fan or anyone that watched any semblance of Sahir West tape last year, they'd go, sign me up. I want that guy in a football jersey. And even before this conversation, Madman, we were talking about stars and like recruiting stars and how much it matters in today's world. When you got guys like Fernando Mendoza winning the Heisman and Trinidad Chambliss playing in the Final Four, stars matter to an extent. What we want more than anything is development. And what Bob Chesney has shown is he can develop players. So that first and foremost should be the calling card of Mr. Chesney and getting these recruits on campus and opening that portal class to the maximum amount of what we can do, like you said, with the 30 to 40 guys. So number one, we all knew it, Sahir West right there. Number two, and I think this might be my number two player across the board. What do we need more than anything in the world right now, Madman? It is offensive line help, trench play help on both sides of the football. The guy that I'm looking at is Joseph Simmons from James Madison, 6'6", 323 pounds, was dominant last year. Only allowed 14 pressures all season long. He's played over 1,200 snaps of in-game material. I was talking about guys you could plug and play and drop in out there. Find me a guy that has 1,200 snaps. That's about as good as you're going to find at the college football level in terms of reps and energy that you can immediately put on a UCLA football field. Joseph Simmons checks every box. He even held his own, looked pretty good on tape against that dominant defensive line for Oregon in the college football semifinal. So if you can get the left tackle to the most important position on the offensive line, Nico's backside, his security blanket on the O-line, that to me outweighs any other skill position player when it comes to James Madison. So we're going to put our guy Joseph Simmons right behind the freshman All-American in Sahir West. And then third, this one's a little bit more of a toss-up. Wayne Knight, we all want him. I think he's a phenomenal player. 1,700 plus yards, 10 touchdowns, had a very good game against Oregon. He ran for over 100 yards against a very talented Oregon team that shut out Texas Tech this past week. But the problem I see there is we do have a crowded running backs room. And one of the only coaches we retained from UCLA is AJ Stewart, the running backs. So he would be walking into a room that is completely foreign to him, unlike a Sahir West, unlike a Joseph Simmons, where their position coaches came from James Madison to these places. Anthony Woods and, Javian Thomas, we haven't heard yet what their intentions are, but as of now, they are still UCLA Bruins. So it'll be interesting to see what they're going to do when it comes to hitting the portal. So Wayne Knight is my other guy just because you take a chance on this guy. You saw how successful he was in a James Madison jersey, but those are the three that are obvious, from James Madison. I'll just give you one more before we kind of break it down. Justin Eaglin. We're going to need a cornerback 1, cornerback 2, however you kind of look at, how Roderick Pleasant played last year. Eaglin was a ball hawk, man. 5 picks, all Sun Belt performer last year. Had a big pick in the red zone against Dante Moore in the college football playoff game. He returned it for 61 yards. Eaglin, there's something to be said about guys that turn the ball over and get picks because it's the most valuable thing you can do in the game of football from the defensive side. And Eaglin did it in spades last year. 6'1", he's got NFL prototypical size on the outside. I think there's a way if he elevates and he plays similarly how he played at James Madison in the Big Ten, he's not going to make it past day 2 next year on the NFL draft. So Eaglin's another guy that I really like, but those are my 4 James Madison guys that kind of pop for me when I'm looking at who I want to bring in from the Dukes, man. So what do you think about those guys?
No, Thriller, it's so funny because the sort of 3 of the 4 guys, that you spoke of were really kind of the 3 guys that were at the top of my list as well. And, kind of shared that a little bit earlier. And so spot on, Thriller. I think, plan A, plan B, plan C. If there was a number 1 overall pick in this sort of transfer portal draft for UCLA, it's Sahir West. I mean, no question about it. When you look at that size, and you sort of sit him up there on the edge and, he's sort of a hybrid in so many different ways as well with that body. He reminds you a little bit of Latu. He reminds you a little bit of Anthony Barr, there's with that sort of explosiveness. And, you talked about the 7 sacks, the 14.5 tackles for loss. I mean, this is exactly the player that you need to be able to anchor that defensive front. And so I think he, especially when you look at the continuity, right, of the system and the fact that you get the same system, but now you elevate from the Sun Belt to the Big Ten. And, if you're close on the NIL, it feels like it's a no-brainer for Sahir West to come to UCLA because you have the continuity, you get the notoriety with the elevation of the conference, and, if you get sort of the elevated nil and that UCLA is pretty close to market on the NIL for him, it just feels like that's a get we have to have. I love the Simmons pick as well, Thriller. Nothing is a substitute for experience. Particularly in the offensive line, when you talk about the 1,200 plus snaps at JMU, just coming in there and providing that anchor. Obviously we got Brooks, Sam Yoon has shown a ton of potential. You sort of couple that with Simmons, you add to the depth. You need guys that are going to kind of build that chemistry, particularly a Thriller, as you mentioned, on that backside for Nico, and what we saw with Nico over the course of the year is just how beat up he got. And he's tough as nails. I don't think there's a tougher quarterback in the country than Nico Iamaleava, but giving him that fortification from a left tackle perspective, I think is absolutely critical. And I agree with you, Thriller, on Wayne Knight. On the one hand, his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, 300 plus yards receiving, the 1,300 plus yards rushing, seeing him now in the Big Ten, he feels like a really nice Big Ten back, I think would be very significant. But if you say in terms of needs, it's a little bit lower on that list because you have Woods and because you have Jet. Because if you can imagine seeing Woods and Jet in that system and doing quite well themselves. But again, you can never have too many backs. Having 2 or 3 backs in your rotation that are really, really high quality, particularly as you're dealing with injury, and also this system. I think the Dean Kennedy system dictates that you get 2 or 3 backs kind of get 10 touches, in some form or fashion over the course of the game. So I love that. And then, of course, I think the corner help would be very, very significant. Thriller, particularly. I mean, think about the duos that we saw in the Big Ten this year from a wide receiver perspective. You talked about the way to be able to change the game defensively is to be able to intercept passes, to be able to disrupt the passing lanes. My God, the 3 most dynamic duos from a wide receiver standpoint in all of college football were in the Big Ten this year, right, Thriller? I mean, think about it. Between Smith and Tate at Ohio State, between Surratt and Cooper at Indiana, between Lemon and Lane at USC. I mean, the receiving talent in the Big Ten, is at this point, I think, the preeminent conference in terms of receiving talent. And you're seeing the quality of recruiting that's taken place. You're seeing what's going on with the portal elsewhere in the country. So the fortification of your secondary, I think, is very critical. Thriller, that would be an absolute home run if UCLA goes 4 for 4 there. I completely agree.
Yeah, so those are like the James Madison guys that we think are, impact players that should be at the top of UCLA's list. I got some guys that make sense realistically, and some rumors around these guys make it seem like UCLA should be a top option for them. The first guy I'll start with, Dorian Thomas. You might remember him. He's New Mexico's tight end, 6'4", 239-pound tight end, very explosive. I like guys that perform big in big games. He had a chance to play against Michigan opening week, 10 catches, 71 yards, and 2 touchdowns against the Wolverines defense that's littered with NFL talents. He eventually went for 500-plus yards, 6 touchdowns this year, 50-plus catches, was an all-Mountain West selection at the tight end position. I just think, for a team that's totally rebuilding, especially giving Nico one of these toys with Quasi departing as well as Rico Flores, we got to have some receiving threat there. And you can get your guy Dorian Thomas, who came into the Rose Bowl and played pretty well with the New Mexico Lobos. That would be a top choice for me. He's already scheduled a visit to UCLA, which I think is very encouraging. So keep an eye out for Dorian Thomas. That was the first guy that flashed to me. He previously was at University of Arizona, before he went to New Mexico. So he's familiar with the Southwest. He's originally from Washington area. But, who knows? We could see Dorian Thomas committing to UCLA faster than you think if that visit goes well in a Bruins uniform. The other 2 guys that I got, it's 2 Cal players. And when you factor in Vic Cejudo, the new linebackers coach for Cal, he was not just a linebackers coach at Cal either. He was the defensive coordinator, co-defensive coordinator last year for the Bears. There's 2 guys that really, really stand out and I think would immediately make an impact on this defense. And it's Luke Farrelly and it's TJ Bush Jr. So Luke Farrelly, ACC Freshman Defensive Player of the Year, 91 tackles, 5 tackles for a loss. And what was the key factor on a lot of these guys that we're looking at? Are they from the West? Can they make an impact? He went to high school in Carlsbad, guys. So, he is familiar with the LA area. I'm a little worried about this one as a UCLA fan because ACC Freshman Defensive Player of the Year, USC is going to be, trying to beef up that defense. My God, they need tackling after that last play that they had in the bowl game. Farrelly is a guy that stands out, that's on the upswing, and if it goes right, you can have him for multiple years in your defense. So Farrelly is a guy that I'm very high on, the potential there. And then TJ Bush Jr., the edge. He's got 1 year left, but he's very similar to Joseph Simmons, the left tackle, from James Madison, where guy's got 39 starts to his name, 131 career tackles, 28 tackles for a loss, 14 sacks. Originally started at Liberty, transferred over to Cal. He's from the Virginia area originally, but every transfer he's made is just coming more and more to the West Coast. Unless he transfers to Hawaii this time around, he's got to just stay on the West and maybe come down a little south to UCLA. Plucking a couple Cal players would be huge. We famously did it, with Femi Oladipo. We did it with Mikey Matthews this past year. Let's keep that Cal pipeline strong, especially since we open up against them next season in Berkeley. So I think those would be some fun guys. Those are the three guys that I have as kind of, it makes sense, given the coaching ties, given the visits already scheduled. What do you think about those three guys? Because if we get those three, I'd be ecstatic.
Absolutely, Thriller. No, the home runs again. I'll start with Dorian Thomas. What I love about that in particular is, just the athleticism at tight end. You got that 6'4", 6'5" tight end. If you really think about it, Thriller, this Dean Kennedy offensive system at JMU, they had a very similar tight end this year in Lakota Dipre, right? Like that super athletic 6'4", 6'5" guy who's a hybrid, really good with the ball, but also is going to be able to be a significant factor in terms of your block game for, both run as well as pass protection. And I think that's going to really need to be an element moving forward in 2026 for Nico. I think what we're going to be seeing out of this Dean Kennedy system is it's going to be a lot more passes out of the backfield, to running backs in terms of check down situations. And then you need that middle of the field blanket, from a tight end standpoint, particularly as you're elevating an offensive line. You really need your backs and your tight ends to be big time receiving targets, because you're not always going to have the luxury to be able to go down the field depending on where the state of your offensive line is. And so when you couple that need of having the short and intermediate pass game there, coupled with the fact that Thomas really fits that athletic mold of what the tight end position looks like in a Dean Kennedy system, coupled with the fact that I think what's going to really help Nico in 2026 in terms of avoiding more hits is going to be to have that sort of middle of the field security blanket at tight end. Dorian Thomas checks all of those boxes in a significant way. And Thriller, what a time we're in college football, where guys that have beaten other teams, the following year potentially are looking. I mean, we got Dorian Thomas up close and personal in that New Mexico game that we still have PTSD from at the start of this season. He had a tremendous effort in that game. You mentioned that Michigan game as well in the Big House. So when you're talking about against, really high-end competition, he has done a phenomenal job. Again, a plug-and-play offensive weapon, especially as you think about the refortification of the wide receiver room as well, right, Thriller? You mentioned it. Now between Gilmer, Flores Jr., and TMA graduating, right now the only returning receiver that's over 100 yards receiving is Mikey Matthews. And so, you need to be able to have greater depth and athleticism at the tight end position. I love Farelli, I love Bush for all of the reasons that you described. We need to fortify that linebacker room in a significant way, right? We lose John, we lose Chisholm. That new influx needs to be there. And then Bush potentially on the opposite side of Sahir West, Thriller. I mean, think about that in terms of being able to hit both edges would be absolutely significant. I'll be honest with you. I am not as worried about some other programs. You always have to sort of be worried from a marketplace standpoint. The fact that Cal and UCLA are so similar in terms of academics, in terms of that pipeline, because of all that calimony, UCLA has found a way to be able to get all these Cal players over the last 2 or 3 years. So that pipeline is there. I think it's going to be interesting to me how new Cal head coach, current Oregon defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoi handles Farelli and Bush. I would think that given his defensive background, he's going to make that a priority. So I think the war between Chesney and Lupoi for those two guys in particular, I think is going to be a fascinating battle. But you nailed it in terms of being able to go east-west in terms of horizontal athleticism from a linebacker perspective, and then having that second edge. I mean, look, we've seen it, Thriller. The Big Ten is built inside out. We say it time and again. And if you can pressure the quarterback consistently, that becomes the great equalizer for you in so many different ways. It can mask deficiencies on the offensive side. It can mask deficiencies on the back end from a secondary perspective. Your ability to pressure the quarterback is the single greatest barometer to sort of your success in any season. So I love those three, Thriller. Absolutely phenomenal gets they would be, and it would just continue to build the momentum. Thriller, you're on fire here. Give me the last three guys. My goodness.
I've got more. I got more than three, too. And what I'd say with Farelli, and what I'd say with Farelli and Bush Jr. is we're at an advantage right now because Lupoi is still coaching the Oregon Ducks.
That's right.
Chesney has the advantage to get off the ground here, establish those relationships. It's not like these guys declared before Lupoi's come. they've declared in the last few days.
Yes.
So that is a big advantage for UCLA. So hit them in the portal, get them down to UCLA, and show them what we got cooking at the Wasserman Center for UCLA.
So, Thriller,
Bruins.
does that mean that we're rooting for Oregon against Indiana then? Because the longer Oregon keeps playing.
Big Ten. I'm still in my heart of hearts. I think I got to pull for Indiana. I'm an underdog guy. But with that being said, if it helps land Ferrelli and Bush Jr., you bet your ass I'm rooting for the Ducks. That's how I put it on that one, man. We're trying to get UCLA the best roster possible when it comes to 2026. And, here are the guys that I think, they just entered the portal. You could see some ties. Maybe they're loose ties, but some ties where UCLA can get there. And, maybe it's a money thing, but like we talked about at the press conference, these are not our words. These are your words, UCLA administration. You're trying to put money back in the football program. Let's see it. I want to see it, especially in this portal, to back up your new hire in Bob Chesney. So let's start at the top. I know we just did a running back in Wayne Knight, but my eyes perked up when I saw Roderick Robinson enter the portal. Former UCLA running back commit with Chip Kelly back in the day from San Diego. Was a Georgia Bulldog. He's battled injuries, 3 touchdowns in a couple years. He is a behemoth of a running back, 6'1", 235 pounds. And Madman, stop me if you've heard this before. Bigger bulldozing running back transfers from a big-time program back to UCLA, reinvents himself, and gets the Bruins program fired up and back to levels we haven't seen in a while. Sounds a lot like Zach Charbonnet.
Yes, sir.
Oh, not to compare anybody to the great Zach Charbonnet, but Roderick Robinson was a very highly recruited running back as well. He's kind of fallen on some hard times through injuries and just the depth chart at Georgia. I mean, that's one of the toughest places to see playing time in college football. Get this guy back in a UCLA uniform, and I think we're going to be cooking with gas with Roderick Robinson back in a Bruins J. So let's see if that can come to fruition. The other guys that I'm looking at, man, there's one that's just a very safe pick. It's very similar to TJ Bush Jr. It's the safety, Ty Benefield from Boise State, 6'2", 200-pound safety. This guy had over 100 tackles last year alone, Madman, 8.5 tackles for a loss and 2 picks, and has started 32 games for the Boise State Broncos over the past 3 seasons. I like guys that can plug and play. I know exactly what I'm getting. You get a starting safety immediately with this guy coming to UCLA. And hey, I saw some, numbers. It's between probably $500,000 and $800,000 to get this guy. Let's see that money put on the table for a guy like Ty Benefield. It's time to show it. There's another dude that I really like, and we've talked about the offensive line. Offensive line is a big thing that we're trying to build upon. Paki Finau is a redshirt sophomore offensive lineman tackle. We need tackle depth, man. DeGiorgio's gone. Ruben Unige has graduated. Nope. We don't have these guys anymore. Even if we get Joseph Simmons, we're going to need more tackle depth. Paki Finau, redshirt sophomore last year, started 4 games, appeared in 12 of 13 games for the Washington Huskies, 6'6", 315 pounds, from Hesperia, California, down here in SoCal. It just makes a lot of sense if he's trying to come close to home. I know I need Nico on the phones calling up these offensive linemen, telling them, hey, we'd love to get you in a UCLA J, man. Come on down. The water is warm here in Westwood. Get Paki Finau down here. And then the last dude, I mean, DeAndre Moore Jr. is a dream. It's the Texas speedster wide receiver.
Yeah.
St. John's Bosco Brave. We have a lot of St. John's Bosco players in this pipeline. He's already set up a visit to Texas Tech. So if it's money, I don't know if we can compete with that oil money, just plain and simple. But our new wide receiver coach, it kind of perked my ears up. Colin Lockett, from New Mexico.
Right.
I also think is a big reason why Dorian Thomas is visiting UCLA. He was a St. John's Bosco grad himself and coached back in high school the St. John's Bosco Braves. So all I'm saying is, Mr. Lockett, give a phone call to our guy DeAndre Moore. You never know. When it's right in Southern California, there's no other place in the country you'd rather be. So those are the 4 guys that I got in the top where, this hasn't been reported. These aren't things that,
sure.
We haven't heard of. But if you look closely enough at the fine print, there's a lot to like there. And if UCLA puts on a full court press, they'll have a shot at.
Well, Thriller, I mean, that's what makes, I think, this channel so special is you're going to get the information that you don't get anywhere else. You're not going to get recycled takes from some of the larger national outlets because we care so much about this team and we're so sort of involved and plugged in Thriller, I love that list so much. I'm going to double click on a few here. Roderick Robinson, you nailed it. I mean, in terms of just the narrative around, hey, a revitalization, a la Zach Charbonnet coming from Michigan, was a little lost in the depth chart, and then came to UCLA. And I think what I love about the Robinson potential there is it's a complementary back to where the running back room is right now, right? When we think about Woods, when we think about Javian Thomas, when we even think about Wayne Knight, right? They're more kind of scat back, smaller guys that are sort of more lower center of gravity. There's a lot of pop to them as well, but they're not that big, bruising Big Ten running back. We saw flashes of it with Berger over the last couple of years, but you need kind of that thunder and lightning combination in the Big Ten to really be complete from a running back room perspective. And Woods, Jet, even a Wayne Knight, there's a lot of overlap in terms of style as well as in terms of size. Robinson rounds out that room in a very, very significant way from a thunder and lightning perspective. So that, to me, really jumps off the page. Man, Moore Jr., Thriller. I mean, I think you nailed it. I think it's going to be really fascinating to see. That's the perfect archetype, right? These guys from SoCal, from these big blue blood programs like Mater Dei, like Bosco, like Rancho Santa Margarita, et cetera, in that Trinity League down in Orange County, went to some big time programs. It hasn't worked out from a depth chart perspective. How do we bring them back? Now, Moore Jr. is going to be coveted. You said it best. I mean, Texas Tech is a team that just made it to the college football playoff. There's a lot of articles out there on ESPN and other major national outlets about kind of some of the billionaire oil money backing that Texas Tech is getting, which has led to their rise. So it's going to be a very interesting bidding war, but that needs to be the blueprint. And Chesney's already talked about really infiltrating that pipeline of Southern California high school powers, because that's going to be the key moving forward. So Moore Jr., that would be an absolute coup, in a very, very significant way. And I love Benefield. To your point, Thriller, I think the element, if we were looking at this secondary room the last couple of years, I think we've been very corner heavy in terms of quantity, but I think in terms of quality and depth at safety has been kind of an issue. Over the last couple of years, it's been something that we've talked about at length. And so someone like Benefield, you talked about the 100-plus tackles, you talked about the 30-plus starts, you come in, plug and play, but you need to be able to have that thumper from a safety perspective in this Big Ten, someone that's going to come down into the box, help against the run, and then also has sort of those ball skills to be able to shadow a particular offensive scheme with personnel on the offensive side that may be more talented on the outside. So you'd need to have that versatility. I think it's versatility that we have lacked from a safety room perspective consistently over the last 5 or 6 years, and bringing Benefield in would just create, I think, so much more variety from a defensive standpoint. Because sometimes the things get lost is your ability to sort of umbrella the back end of your defense and allows you to do much more exotic things up front, right? If you can kind of run sort of a zone shell on the back end, that allows you from a defensive front perspective to bring simulated pressures. It allows you to bring disguises from a pressure standpoint as well, do different things from a formation. When you feel like the back end is deficient, it sort of limits what you can do. You're going to go sort of path of least resistance from a pass rush perspective because you're really worried about that back end. You're worried about giving up inside leverage. You're worried about getting beat over the top. Somebody like Benefield actually opens up the front game more than you sort of realize, and particularly for a team that's looking to totally rebuild this defensive front, you can do it by obviously getting the talent on the defensive line and the edge, but a great way to do it also is actually, it's counterintuitive, get great safety play so then you can do more things with the players that you have up front. So, Thriller, it's an absolute home run list of JMU guys that have very strong ties to this coaching staff and where we've had sort of pedigree, and then guys where it just kind of makes sense. Thriller, this is going to be, like you and I have talked about, an absolutely bananas next 15 days here. Buckle up, because these next 14, 15 days are really going to determine the next 14, 15 months, in so many ways for this team, particularly in year one of the Chesney era. So I anticipate you and I are going to go live a bunch. I anticipate you and I are going to have a lot of breaking news updates a bunch. So stay with us, fans. Thriller, before we get out of here, anything you want to close on just another great episode in the books?
Man, just have your voices loud and proud on social media. These kids see what you say about them. And if you open up the welcome mat, show them the good things about LA and being a UCLA Bruin, they're going to be receptive to that. So I'm asking everyone that listens, watches this show, the alumni that played football at UCLA, open the welcome mat. It's time to take back this city. USC has been weak. What did Bob Chesney say in the opening press conference? We're not trying to be the other team. We're trying to be the team in Los Angeles. And it starts from everyone across the board in terms of supporting this team. Like and subscribe, guys. We need your help. We are trying to do everything we can to bring you the top-notch UCLA football content that we do here at the LA Football Network. So much love to all you guys. Happy New Year. And let's get some damn fucking recruits in here.
Let's get some recruits up in here, Thriller. I'm ready to run through a wall. And before we get out of here, two things. One, I know we didn't talk about it a bunch, so I'll just say it for 20 seconds, and then maybe, Thriller, we bring it up at a future episode. Nico Malloy, you talked about it.
Yeah,
now
Penn
joining
State.
Danton Lynn at Penn State. I mean, what a world we live in college football. Danton Lynn goes from UCLA to USC. Now USC to Penn State, his alma mater, and Nico Malloy and Danton Lynn get reunited. But we really wish Nico Malloy nothing but the best, and just everything that he puts his heart into everything. We love him tremendously, and really happy that he's found a really nice landing spot at a preeminent program. And then, of course, our crowd favorite, our one and only Jerry Neuheisel, again, in the soap opera that is college football, reunites with Chip Kelly at Northwestern.
In Drevno, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In Drevno, I don't know if any of us had that on our bingo cards, but again, two wonderful Bruins who are going to be Bruins for life, who find really nice landing spots where they have continuity with the staff. They get to stay in the Big Ten, one of the two preeminent conferences, and play for some really good programs. So absolutely thrilled for Malloy and Mr. Neuheisel. And then Rick, getting a job there, Thriller, with the UFL there. I think it's the Renegades, I believe. Wishing Rick the best there. I'm sure he's going to have sort of a ball with that moving forward, and perhaps that becomes a gateway of Rick getting back into, college football coaching at some point in the future, and we'll keep our eye on that. So, Thriller, another great one in the books. Before we get out of here, we got to pay the bills. Download that number one sports app on the market today, that Sleeper app that you see right below us. Real-time stats, incredible engagement, fully immersive experience, one-stop shop. This is the preeminent app for all of your sports needs, whether you're talking about different lines, different sports, different over-unders, all different configurations of various sports outcomes. You got it all at the Sleeper app. It's the number one sports app in the market today, in the entire country today, for a reason. And on top of that, you get $100 off match bonus when you tell them the guys from the LAFB network sent you. Use that promo code UCLA LAFB, and $100, you get $100 match bonus. 100 becomes 200. And then you become very, very dangerous on this Sleeper app. So download the number one Sleeper app and tell them the Thriller and Madman and the guys from the LAFB network sent you. Well, fans, again, Happy New Year. It is a year of revival, of rebirth, of refreshing our Bruin pride, our Bruin blood, our Bruin souls. And like Thriller said, be loud, be proud, be passionate Bruins. And like we always say, 4's up forever, baby.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.